As we get to the problems here in section 2 in part A, we're going to be drawing angles in standard position. Okay, when you think about on the X and Y axis, up until now you haven't really dealt with angles greater than 180. But we could have more than one full revolution, so we can have angles more than 360 degrees. Think about whatever, we can have them more than 180, but up until now you've dealt with them basically in figures where you don't really get into that. Okay, so now we can have angles that are 2,000 degrees. It would just be multiple revolutions. Okay, and some definitions when we draw these angles that you need to write down. Some positive angle measure. So if I have positive angle measure, that is going to be in the counterclockwise direction. So I'm going to say counterclockwise. Negative angle measure is clockwise. Okay, so and I think I have that indicated on your blue reference sheet. But we always start, and we have what's called an initial side and a terminal side. The initial side, we always start on the positive X axis when we're talking about any angle, whether we're going to have a negative or a positive angle. Okay, the terminal side is where it ends, so the ending, where it ends up when you're making a revolution, and we're rotating it about the origin. So if you look at number 2 here, we've got 290 degrees. So my initial side is right here on the positive x-axis, and I'm at a positive 290, so I want to go in a clockwise direction. Okay, I'm sorry, a counterclockwise. Clockwise would be negative. This is a positive angle. So I'm going to go counterclockwise. So I'm going to start here. So I draw that initial side, and you need to indicate your angles with arrows. So I'm going to go, that would be 90, this would be 180, another 90 would be 270. So I'm at 270 right now, which is just basically 3/4 of a turn there, and I've got to go 20 degrees past that negative y-axis side. So my terminal side is going to end up right about there. And so I draw an arrow, and it's very important that you include this arrow right here and then put an arrow to it, the terminal side. Okay, that, and then you should label the degree measure, so that is a 290 degree angle. And again, it's positive. If we go to the, now we have some radian measures. Any of these angles in terms of pi here, so like 9 and 10 and 11, 12, 13, 14, they are all in terms of pi. Now, we have to draw those angles. Again, positive and negative doesn't change. Positive is always a counterclockwise direction from the positive x-axis, that initial side. A negative angle, or a negative angle in terms of radians, is always a clockwise from there. So we'll do number 11. Okay, now you should have watched the video on filling in the unit circle. Okay, and so you need to think about those things on the unit circle, and we need to do a negative pi over 6 radian measure angle. Okay, now if you think about the unit circle, positive pi over 6, if this was 0 and this was pi radians and all the way around was 2 pi, okay, and this, basically pi over 6 would be 1/6 of the way around to pi. So if I went 1/6 of the way around, this was pi over 6. Okay, remember this was, and then the next one up, this would be 2 pi over 6 or pi over 3. This would be 3 pi or 3/6 pi, which is pi over 2. Okay, so keep that in mind that pi over 6 was right here. So this would be a pi over 6 degree angle in the positive. Well, I need to go negative pi over 6. So if I go negative pi over 6, I'm Going in a negative direction, just 1/6 pi, so it's going to be about there, and that was equivalent to 30 degrees on the unit circle. So I would indicate with an arrow there, and I would say that is negative pi over 6 radians. Okay, now in the next, we get into converting from degrees to radians, radians to degrees, and we're going to do number 20 right here. So that is in degrees. Now, it doesn't matter if it's positive or negative, but I'm starting in degrees. So I'm going degrees to radians. And the rule says I want to multiply whatever the degree measure is by pi over 180. And I'm going to leave it in terms of pi because that's usually how we express radian degree measure. So I'm going to take negative 150, and I'm going to put it over 1, make it a fraction, because I'm multiplying by the fraction pi over 180. Now, you are not going to plug in 3.14 for pi. We're going to leave it in terms of pi. So if I do that here, that would be negative 150 times pi, which is negative 150 pi, over 1 times 180, 180. And I'm going to go ahead and reduce that. And if I reduce that, it ends up being negative 5 pi over 6. So negative 150 degrees is negative 5/6 pi. Okay, we're going to do number 24 as well. So it's 7 pi over 6. Now this is starting in radians, so now I'm going radians to degrees. And the rule there says I multiply by 180 over pi. And you're going to see why we do this. We're going to take 7 pi over 6, and we're going to multiply it by 180 over pi. My pi's cancel, so I really have 7 times 180 on the top. And then we're going to divide by 6. And if I go ahead and do that on the calculator, and you could check this, that does give you 210 degrees. So 7 pi over 6 is equivalent to 210 degrees. Okay. Now some of these you could look on your unit circle and find the degree measure. Obviously the negative degree measures are not on your unit circle. You have to find where they end up, but it's easy just to multiply by pi over 180 if I'm going degrees to radians, or 180 over pi if I'm going radians to degrees.